The greenhouse effect and global warming is a major issue across all the countries in the world today. There has been several various protocols in order to combat the global climate crisis. One of the most important of them was the Kyoto Protocol. Hello and welcome to UPSC Geography View. Today, let's learn about the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol, in full, the Kyoto Protocol to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, international treaty named for the Japanese city in which it was adopted, was on December 1997. The Kyoto Protocol aimed to reduce the emission of gases that contributed to global warming. In force since 2005, the Kyoto Protocol called for reducing the emission of 6 greenhouse gases in 41 countries plus the European Union to 5.2% below 1990 levels during the commitment period of 2008 to 2012. The Kyoto Protocol was widely hailed as the most significant environmental treaty ever negotiated, though some critics questioned its effectiveness. Let's take a look at the background and provisions of the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol was adopted as the first addition to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC, an international treaty that committed its signatories to develop national programs to reduce their emissions of greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, perfluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride affect the energy balance of the global atmosphere in ways expected to lead to an overall increase in global average temperature known as global warming. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, established by the United Nations Environmental Programme and the World Meteorological Organization in 1988, the long-term effects of global warming would include a general rise in sea level around the world, resulting in the inundation of low-lying coastal areas and the possible disappearance of some island states. The melting of glaciers, sea ice, and Arctic permafrost, an increase in the number of extreme climate-related events such as floods and droughts, and changes in their distribution, and also an increased risk of extinction for 20 to 30% of all plant and animal species. The Kyoto Protocol committed most of the Annexure 1 signatories to the UNFCCC, consisting of members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and several countries with economies in transition, to mandatory emission reduction targets, which varied depending on the unique circumstances of each country. Other signatories to the UNFCCC and the Kyoto Protocol, consisting mostly of developing countries, were not required to restrict their emissions. The protocol entered into force in February 2005, 90 days after being ratified by at least 55 Annexure 1 signatories that together accounted for at least 55% of total carbon dioxide emissions in 1990. The Kyoto Protocol provided several means for countries to reach their targets. One approach was to make use of natural processes called sinks that remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. The planting of trees which take up carbon dioxide from the air would be an example. Another approach was the international program called the Clean Development Mechanism, or CDM, which encouraged developed countries to invest in technology and infrastructure in less developed countries where there were often significant opportunities to reduce emissions. Under the Clean Development Mechanism, or CDM, the investing country could claim the effective reduction in emissions as a credit toward meeting its obligations under the protocol. An example would be an investment in a clean-burning natural gas power plant to replace a proposed coal-fired plant. A third approach was emission trading, which allowed participating countries to buy and sell emission rights and thereby placed an economic value on greenhouse gas emissions. European countries initiated an emissions trading market as a mechanism to work toward meeting their commitments under the Kyoto Protocol. countries that fail to meet their emission targets would be required to make up the difference between their targeted and actual emissions plus a penalty amount of 30% in the subsequent commitment period, beginning in 2012. They would also be prevented from engaging in emissions trading until they were judged to be in compliance with the Kyoto Protocol. The emission targets for commitments period after 2012 were to be established in future protocols. Let's learn about the challenges of the Kyoto Protocol. Although the Kyoto Protocol represented a landmark diplomatic accomplishment, its success was far from assured. Indeed, reports issued in the first 2 years after the treaty took effect indicated that most participants would fail to meet their emission targets. Even if the targets were met, however, the ultimate benefit to the environment would not be significant. According to some critics, since China, the world's leading emitter of greenhouse gases, and the United States, the world's second largest emitter, were not bound by the protocol. China because of its status as a developing country, and the United States because it had not ratified the protocol. Other critics claimed that the emission reductions called for in the protocol were too modest to make a detectable difference in global temperatures in the subsequent several decades, even if fully achieved with US participation. Meanwhile, some developing countries argued that improving adaptation to climate variability and change was just as important as reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Let's learn about the treaty extension and replacement. At the 18th Conference of the Parties, the COP18, held in Doha, Qatar in 2012, delegates agreed to extend the Kyoto Protocol until 2020. They also reaffirmed their pledge from COP17, which had been held in Durban, South Africa in 2011, to create a new comprehensive legally binding climate treaty by 2015 that would require greenhouse gas producing countries, including major carbon emitters not abiding by the Kyoto Protocol such as China, India and the United States, to limit and reduce their emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. The new treaty, planned for implementation in 2020, would fully replace the Kyoto Protocol. After a series of conferences mired in disagreements, delegates at the COP21 held in Paris, France in 2015 signed a global but non-binding agreement to limit the increase of the world's average temperature to no more than 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels, while at the time striving to keep this increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The landmark accord, signed by all 196 signatories of the UNFCCC, effectively replaced the Kyoto Protocol. It also mandated a progress review every 5 years and the development of a fund containing $100 billion by 2020, which would be replenished annually to help developing countries adopt non-greenhouse gas producing technologies. Thank you for listening to this discussion on the Kyoto Protocol. For more such discussions, get the UPSC Practice app from the App Store.